Hi, my name's Romy.
Kirsty.
Hi, Bubby. Here, you hop on this chair. And today I bring you my third book review. Yay! So I recently finished the third book on my Romy Sets Aside 10 books to read in 2019, but they're not the only 10 books she wants to read. They're not the only 10 books she has read, but they're ones that she's read before and she picked off her bookshelf and wants to reread. And it was Beyond the Deepwoods by Paul Stewart and Chris Riddell. I read this so many years ago. I read this when I was like 9 through to early teens, which I mean like early 13. So I'm not sure when I first read this book. This was the first one I read in the entire like 9-book series or whatever, but from around the age of I think 9 to around 13 I was reading this series, and I think I've read this one twice already and I never actually finished the whole series. I think I read 5 out of 9 books. So I read all of the Twig series, 2 of the Quint series, and maybe one of the other ones, I don't know. But anyway, this I was so excited to reread, and maybe because I was so excited because I remembered how phenomenal a series it was and how much I cherished it. I don't know, maybe because of that my expectations were just very high, and they were. My expectations with all of these books are high because I know how important they are to me. And maybe that made the disappointment all the more intense. So Beyond the Deepwoods, I just did not enjoy it. I pretty much enjoyed the last 2 chapters, and I can't believe I actually managed to get through it as a child because it is an intense book. So Beyond the Deepwoods, I did not enjoy. I pretty much liked the last 2 chapters, and it was my liking for the last 2 chapters that made me start the second book, which I can't even remember what it's called, but the second Twig book, which I have nearly finished, and after that I don't plan on reading anymore, and I was hoping to have read the whole 9 books this year, but it is just not for me at all. I was really enjoying the second book. I think it's called Last of the Sky Pirates. It's not. Anyway, I was really enjoying that, but about halfway through it just kind of took a turn, and I've decided to finish it but not to read the rest of them, so sorry books. And I will say I adored this series as a kid. I thought it was fantastic and I truly loved it, and my thoughts now don't lessen that love, they just kind of make me tilt my head at it slightly and wonder like how I enjoyed it so much, because it's not my cup of tea now at all. But I did, and there's that. So young Romy, don't be mad, but I don't share your taste in books, apparently. Not in all books. I mean, I still love Lauren Child. She's phenomenal. Give me a Clarice Bean book or Charlie and Lola and I will be happy for days, honestly. That pesky rat, fantastic. Who Wants to Be a Poodle? I Don't. One of the best books. Oh, and the storybook walls, so good. But anyway, Lauren Child aside, Beyond the Deepwoods, I didn't really find anything in it that I liked. I didn't particularly like the world. I liked the prospect of the world, but I didn't really like how the world came to fruition, if you will. I didn't feel like it had any significant plot. Like, there's a kind of idea, Twig, who has been brought up by wood trolls in the deep woods, and has been told never to stray from the path, and finds out that the wood trolls who he has grown up thinking of as his parents, they found him when he was a baby, and his whole perspective on the world shifts, and there's kind of a lot of anger and shame and disappointment and self-deprecation and a little bit of self-loathing in there as well, I think. And Twig really struggles in this book, and he also whines a lot, and he whines too much for my liking. He's quite irritating, and you know, like, he does have a lot of struggles. Misfortune seems to fall upon Twig in this book. From living in one way, He's sent off in the middle of the night to go live with some cousins until danger passes, by himself through the treacherous deep woods, and from there, basically everything implodes, and each chapter is basically a disaster for Twig. But not everything's bad. He does have some pretty jolly good times, and he doesn't really focus on them at all. I think there's like one moment where he's like, yeah, I'm happy, and the rest of it he's just like, why me? Why is all this stuff happening to me? And that got a little wearisome for me. And I don't remember him being like that. I remember really loving Twig and really loving his personality, but this read I didn't really feel like he had much of a personality, aside from the fact that he thought how unfair his life was, pretty much. So I didn't really feel like there was very much of a plot. It was just kind of disaster, disaster, disaster. And it just went that way. And that gives you a great scope of the characters in this world, but it very much does feel like this is the first book that will kind of explain the world and the characters and give you an idea of this series. And then we'll get to like plot stuff in the next book, and there are a few plot points in this, obviously, but it felt like it wasn't really going anywhere. I remembered it, I knew where it was going, but it felt much more like it was this is a lead up to what's to come. And that was kind of, it wasn't boring. It was never boring, because this book is so full of things happening, but it wasn't very, I didn't find myself invested in it, because there didn't feel like there was much to become invested in. It does feature one of the most saddest character deaths, and our peahen's watching me through my window. Hey Abby, are you watching our bits? And reading that again was pretty sad, because a character, probably my favourite character in the book at the time and now, dies. And that was pretty sad to relive, and probably sadder remembering how much it cut me up, because back then, like, I adored this character and it was just so sad. And I remember that was probably like the first character death I was aware of, or I don't know, probably the first character that I really loved that died, if not the first character in a book I read that died, and that was rough. It is a incredibly strange book, and that was something that I cherished. I like really unusual books, and apparently I did as a child as well. Everything is like, it's a completely new world. Nothing pretty much is as you would expect or as you would be used to. And that is really interesting, and I can't imagine the effort and the work that went into creating this whole new existence, because that's phenomenal. But again, without being connected to a plot or really being connected to more than one character, that wasn't really enough for me this time, and a lot of it is gruesome. And as I have said before, I don't have a high tolerance for scary things or like gruesome things. And it wasn't that it was super frightening, it was just that it was so very dark. There are a lot of deaths, there's a lot of, again, like I think I said this with Unline Done, all the times when I was uncomfortable with a scene or a character's descriptions or whatever it was, that's when an illustration would come in. And again, with the Deepwoods, all the characters I didn't want to see depicted, there they were, and I had to stare at them whilst I read the other page. And there are a lot of fearsome characters, and there are a lot of gross characters, and there are a lot of kind of gross things that happen in the book that I was not keen on, and a lot of them were illustrated. And I really am a big fan of Paul Stewart and Chris Riddell as a team. I love their far-flung adventures, and I love Muddle Earth, but I did not enjoy the gruesome detail or the characters that I already didn't like, seeing them come to life, it was a bit much for me. Okay, I've written on my notes that I enjoyed the last 3 chapters, so there was a period about halfway through where a lot of things were happening that I was not comfortable with or didn't enjoy, and it just kind of, they were building on top of each other, and it got to a point where I nearly put the book down. I think I set it aside and read something else, or just didn't read it for a night or two, and I considered just putting it down. And because I loved it so much as a child, I kept reading, and I did end up enjoying the last 2 or 3 chapters, as I say, but I came so close to just not finishing, and I'm not a big fan of not finishing a book in the middle of a book. Like, I can read a few pages and know I'm not going to read it or enjoy it, so I don't read the book, but once I'm invested, to whatever extent that may be, once I'm halfway through, I don't really like putting things down, but I will if I need to. And it's happened again with the second book. I'm like 100 pages. Are you snorting? Are you sneezing and coughing and snorting and puffing and huffing? I'm about 100 pages from the end of the second book, and it's just getting pretty intense and gruesome and a bit much for me, and I am going to finish it, but I have decided, as I say, not to read the rest of the series, which is quite sad for me because I was really looking forward to finding out what happens and like following the journey, which is building up a lot more plot-wise in this second book. But yeah, I'm not going to, because it's all just a bit too much for me, and it's not particularly enjoyable, which is very disappointing. Beyond the Deepwoods did not have any queer characters that are mentioned. I don't believe there are any in any of the other books that I read as a child. I can't say for sure. There might be, I don't remember, but there weren't any in this book, which as a child I didn't notice. I didn't notice as a child, but as an adult, I would have loved having read this and this being one of my favourite books and it having a queer couple and that being totally normal. That would have been phenomenal and made me so happy now, and would make me treasure this book so much, because that would have been so influential to have that in a book. Because there were very few books, if any, as a child that I read that had queer characters in it, and that's really sad because I wish there had been. Because that's so important, and it's so important to me now, and I wish I had seen that as a kid, because that would have been fantastic. As I say, there are very, very few humans in this book. I think there are 3, and all of them are white. And for female representation, it's both very low in this book and probably hits about the same mark as the other books. This is the first book out of the 10 I've set aside where the main character wasn't a girl, which was pretty interesting actually. I hadn't noticed how used to girls being the main characters I were. Side note, that's brilliant. And Twig is alone for most of the book, aside from all of these calamities that happen when he meets other people. There is a whole chapter where Twig is in an underground colony with terminate trogs, and they have a society where the females hold the position of power, and that was pretty interesting. They are strong and in control and very rough, and transform from human looking creatures when their time comes, and they all hate the downtrodden males, and the only thing that male terminate trogs are there for is to do the cleaning, but otherwise they call them useless and like hate them. So that was kind of a strange way of showing female empowerment. There are a few more female characters that Twig meets briefly, but yeah, for the main part, all the external characters he meets are males, and equally he's alone. So that was Beyond the Deepwoods by Paul Stewart and Chris Riddell. Sadly, a very, very disappointing read for me, which I didn't expect at all, and I'm quite disappointed by. Bye!